The wind cut across the empty plains, cold and sharp, carrying the faint smell of metal from the distant colony. Eric's Vale walked slowly, his hands brushing the tall golden grass that bent under his touch. He was a boy of 13, thin and small for his age, with a mop of dark hair that fell into his eyes. The colony children laughed when they saw him, and the adults whispered that he was strange. Eric's did not mind much. He had never belonged to the games or the crowded streets. He belonged to the quiet places, to the animals, to the wind that carried secrets only he could hear. Every morning the colony erupted in noise and chaos. Shuttles roared into the sky, hauling supplies and machinery. Farmers shouted across fields, herding biostock that mooed and bleated, its strange forms adapted to the planet's harsh climate. Eric's watched from the edge of the colony, leaning against the low stone walls, listening. While others spoke in words meant to control, he spoke in whispers, in clicks and hums, in rhythms that the animals understood. Birds landed near him without fear, a small fox followed him through the grass, and even the herd of sky goats slowed when he passed. The children called him, Whispering Eric's. They laughed behind his back, imitating the sounds he made. "Do the animals answer you, Eric's?" one of them sneered. "Or are you just talking to yourself again?" They tossed scraps of food at him, but Eric's did not raise his voice. He simply knelt, letting the pieces of fruit roll to the ground, and the fox ate quietly by his side. Adults too had their doubts. "He will never survive here," a farmer said to his neighbor. "A boy who thinks he can talk to beasts is useless in a world of work and machines." Machines hummed and clanked, carrying ore and water, but Eric's never seemed to notice. His attention was always on the creatures, the strange signals in the wind, the tiny tremors that hinted at something beneath the soil. That morning the sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Eric's wandered farther than usual, past the mechanical farms and the smog of the shuttle docks. He walked to a hollow where the earth had cracked, exposing strange, glowing veins that pulsed faintly. His fox friend followed, its small paws careful on the rough ground. Eric's knelt, placing his palm on the warm stone. "I hear you," he whispered. His voice was soft, almost lost in the wind, but the veins seemed to respond. They shimmered a little brighter, pulsing in rhythm with his heart. Suddenly a group of boys appeared, their boots crunching the dry grass. "What are you doing out here, freak?" one shouted. Eric's looked up calmly. "I am listening," he said simply. They exchanged glances, unsure if he meant to mock them or if he was even sane. "Listening? You mean talking to those dumb animals?" another said. One of them kicked a small stone toward him. Eric's did not move. The fox growled softly and nipped the boy's ankle. He yelped and stumbled back, laughing nervously. "You see," Eric said, his voice low. "They understand me." The boys stared, unsure how to respond. The fox circled Eric's, ears perked, tail flicking. Eric smiled faintly. "All creatures listen if you try to hear them. You just do not know how." The boys ran off, muttering threats, but Eric's did not chase them. He stood, brushing the dust from his clothes, and turned his attention back to the hollow. The pulsing veins seemed to hum with a soft energy, a quiet vibration that made his chest tingle. He closed his eyes, letting the wind guide his thoughts, feeling the distant heartbeat of the world around him. Life in the colony was never easy. Supplies ran low, storms struck without warning, and the alien wildlife could be dangerous if provoked. Yet Eric's felt no fear. He knew the land and the creatures, and in return they seemed to trust him. He wandered back slowly, stopping to touch a nest of feathered worms, watching them coil and uncurl in perfect rhythm. The other children watched from the walls, whispering and pointing, but Eric's ignored them. He had learned that the world spoke in ways most people could not hear. By evening the sky had turned a deep violet, and stars began to pierce the darkness. Eric's climbed a small ridge overlooking the colony. The lights of the buildings blinked in a pattern he liked to study, each one like a star fallen to the ground. From the ridge, he could see the edge of the forest where the dragons were said to roam in legend. He had never seen one, but sometimes he thought he could hear their distant roar, a low vibration in the air. Eric's whispered toward the horizon, not knowing if they would answer, but hoping they could hear him. Back in the colony the children were restless. "That boy is crazy," they said again. "Talking to animals like he is their king." Adults shook their heads, but some could not deny the small miracles they had seen. A flock of flying fish had landed safely near the docks after following Eric's directions. A young sky goat, lost for hours, had found its way home. Small things, nothing large, but enough to make whispers of wonder ripple quietly through the settlement. Eric sat on the ridge until the moon rose high, the fox curled at his feet. He looked at the stars, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. The voices in the wind were clearer tonight, and he imagined dragons far above, watching and waiting. No one in the colony understood him. They laughed, they mocked, they jeered, but Eric's did not need them to understand. The world spoke to him and he would answer, one whisper at a time. He closed his eyes and listened, letting the wind carry his voice beyond the ridge, beyond the colony, toward the hidden guardians of the skies. The stars twinkled faintly, and for the first time, it felt as if one of them had heard. Eric smiled softly and whispered again, "I am here. I hear you." The morning was quiet, but the air carried tension. Eric's veil walked along the edge of the colony, the fox padding silently at his side. The tall grass swayed in patterns he could read, small ripples revealing where the wind carried hidden vibrations. The colony bustled behind him with the usual noise of shuttles and machinery, but he barely noticed. He was focused on listening, on feeling the world beneath his feet. The humans in the colony had grown restless. Strange energy pulses had been detected beneath the soil, tiny tremors that shook only the edges of buildings and machines. Scientists arrived in sleek, hovering vehicles, their white suits bright against the dusty fields. They spoke in hurried tones, scanning the land with strange devices that beeped and hummed. Everyone looked at Eric's with curiosity and suspicion. The adults whispered, "The boy is always near these events. He might be causing them." Eric's paid no attention. He knew he did not cause the tremors. He only felt them. He knelt by a crack in the earth, fingertips brushing the warm surface. A soft hum vibrated under his palm, almost like a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, listening. From deep within, something ancient pulsed back at him, a voice older than any human memory. It was quiet, patient, and it answered only one way, a way only he could hear. A small group of colonists approached. One of them, a scientist named Leora Cade, knelt beside him. "Eric's, can you feel it?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed her unease. "These readings, we've never seen anything like them. It's almost alive." Eric's nodded without speaking. He listened to the wind, to the tremors beneath the soil, to the subtle movements of the animals nearby. He felt the pulse of life, the quiet rhythm that connected all things. The fox padded closer to the crack and lowered its head, sniffing the air. Birds circled overhead, and a herd of sky goats grazed nearby, their ears alert. Eric's whispered softly, a series of clicks and hums, and the creatures responded. The goats lifted their heads, the birds shifted their flight, and the fox lay down beside him. The scientists exchanged astonished looks. "No one has seen animals respond to him like this," Leora said quietly. "It's extraordinary." Eric's looked up at the scientists, his dark eyes steady. "I do not control them," he said. "I listen. They speak in ways you cannot hear. You only hear noise. I hear meaning." The scientists were silent, unsure how to respond. The boy's voice was small, but it carried authority the adults did not understand. Later, as the sun climbed higher, a warning alarm rang through the colony. Alien scavengers were approaching, a small fleet of sleek, black ships scanning the surface for energy sources. Humans rushed to defend the colony, igniting their turrets and shields. The machines roared, but the aliens moved too fast, striking and retreating before anyone could act. Panic swept through the colony. Children screamed and workers shouted instructions. Eric stood apart, calm as ever. He watched the herd of sky goats, the birds, even the fox, and felt the rising tension in their movements. Something was wrong. The animals knew even if humans did not. Eric stepped into the open plain, letting the wind carry his voice. He whispered in the ancient rhythm he had learned from listening to the soil, the sky, and the creatures around him. The birds circled higher, the fox barked once, and the goats stamped their hooves. He felt a pulse from above, a vibration unlike anything he had sensed before. His heart raced with a strange excitement. Something was coming. Something old, powerful, and alive. The scientists ran toward him, shouting, "Eric's, come back. It's dangerous." But Eric's did not move. He felt the world answering him, not with words, but with a kind of recognition that made his skin tingle. He whispered again, a soft call carried by the wind, and far above the clouds, shadows shifted. Massive shapes moved through the sky, unseen by ordinary eyes. Dragons, ancient beings that had watched the galaxy from the stars, stirred in response to the boy's call. The colony fell silent for a moment, the sound of machines fading under the growing tension. Leora and the other scientists stared in disbelief. "Dragons, that is impossible," one muttered. Eric's lips moved in quiet murmurs. They know I hear them. They remember the old songs. The words made no sense to the humans, but the energy around the boy was undeniable. Something greater than human understanding was at work. Eric's knelt by the crack in the soil again, feeling the pulse of life beneath him. The tremors were stronger now, not violent, but insistent. They are listening, he whispered. The fox rested its head on his knee. Birds landed on nearby rocks, and even the machines seemed to hum differently, as if acknowledging the boy's presence. The scientists could only watch, frozen in awe and confusion. As the day wore on, the alien ships circled closer, unaware of the growing power on the ground. The colonists prepared for a fight they thought they understood, but Eric's knew they were only reacting to the surface. Beneath them and above them, forces older than their technology stirred. He could feel the rhythm of the dragons, a quiet patience, a watchfulness. They had withdrawn long ago, leaving the galaxy to its chaos. Now they were waking, drawn by a human who could hear the world. When night fell, the sky turned deep indigo, and stars began to blink through the darkness. Eric stood at the edge of the plain, the colony behind him, the fox at his side. He raised his hands slightly, whispering into the night, a song that only he could sing. The stars seemed to flicker in answer. A faint glow appeared on the horizon, growing brighter with each heartbeat. Dragons were coming. The humans still did not understand, but they could feel it. The air thrummed with a strange energy, and even the machines seemed to pause. Eric smiled faintly, listening to the quiet replies of the world. He had never felt alone. The animals, the wind, the hidden pulse beneath the soil, and now the dragons above, all were speaking to him. And for the first time, the colony realized that the boy they mocked might know more about the world than they ever could. Eric's whispered one final word into the night. I hear you. And somewhere far above, beyond the reach of human eyes, the dragons answered. The sun was barely rising when the first alien ships appeared on the horizon. Black silhouettes glinted in the pale light, moving faster than any human shuttle. The colony stirred, alarms ringing through the air, but even as humans scrambled, Eric's veil stood calmly on the open plain, the fox at his side. He did not shout or run. He listened. The animals around him sensed danger. Birds scattered and screeched, and the sky goats stamped and tossed their heads, uneasy. Yet Eric's knelt in the grass, feeling the vibrations beneath the soil, the faint pulse in the air. He whispered in the rhythm he had learned from years of listening, soft clicks and hums that seemed to harmonize with the energy in the world. The tremors beneath his feet grew stronger, and the distant sky above seemed to shimmer. The alien ships hovered closer, scanning the colony with cold precision. Machines fired and turrets swung into position, but their blasts bounced harmlessly off the ship's shields. Humans screamed and ran, caught between fear and confusion. Eric's did not move. He closed his eyes and whispered again, letting the wind carry his voice far beyond the colony, beyond the mountains, beyond the atmosphere itself. High above, in the silent darkness of space, dragons stirred. Massive creatures with scales that shimmered like starlight moved slowly into position. They had observed the galaxy from the edges of the stars for centuries, silent and patient. They had turned away from human struggles, believing their time had passed. But this boy, this small, strange human who could hear what others could not, was calling them back. The first dragon appeared above the colony, a shadow against the sun. Its wings stretched wide, dark but edged with a faint glow, scales glittering like molten metal. Humans screamed, pointing and stumbling backward, but Eric's opened his eyes and smiled faintly. The dragon circled once, twice, and then hovered, watching him. It lowered its massive head and exhaled a slow, warm breeze that ruffled his hair. You see? Eric's whispered to the fox. They hear me. The creatures around him seemed to relax, the birds returning to perch on the rocks, the goats standing quietly, their eyes reflecting the growing light above. The alien ships faltered, scanning the sky, but their sensors failed to detect the dragons. The humans watched in disbelief as the impossible unfolded. More dragons arrived, each larger than the last, their wings creating gusts that shook the colony's structures. They did not attack. They did not roar in anger. They simply hovered, vast and silent, their eyes fixed on Eric's. He walked slowly toward the center of the plain, raising his hands slightly, letting the wind carry his voice. The dragons responded subtly, adjusting their positions, their massive forms forming a circle above him, shielding the colony from the alien threat. The alien ships fired, beams of energy cutting through the sky, but the dragons moved with impossible speed. They dodged the blasts, weaving through the air with a grace that made the humans' machines look clumsy. Then, with a synchronized motion, they retaliated, not with fire or death, but with force fields and energy pulses that disabled the alien ships, knocking them from the sky. One by one the attackers fell back, retreating into the distance. The colony watched, mouths open, as their defenses had failed, yet they were saved by beings they had only thought existed in legend. Eric's remained in the center of the plain, calm and still. The fox sat beside him, its tail flicking. He closed his eyes and listened to the dragon's movements, feeling the subtle hum of their presence, the rhythm of their breath. The tremors beneath the soil had slowed, replaced by a soft, steady pulse. Something older than time itself had acknowledged him, and it was watching, patient and protective. The scientists approached cautiously, their equipment useless in the face of the dragons. Leora Kate stepped forward, voice trembling. "Eric's, how are you doing this?" He opened his eyes and looked at her, dark and steady. "I am listening," he said simply. "They respond to the voice they remember. Not ours but mine." She shook her head, unable to comprehend. The colony had mocked him for years, calling him strange and weak. Now they had no words. The dragons hovered for hours, circling the colony, their wings casting enormous shadows over the buildings. Eric's moved slowly among the animals, whispering directions, guiding them away from danger. The fox padded beside him, and the birds flew in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. Even the humans began to notice the difference. The world responded when Eric's called. By evening the alien threat had vanished, their ships retreating into the horizon. The colony was safe not because of weapons or machines, but because of a boy who had learned to listen. The humans were silent, staring at the sky where the dragons still hovered, massive and glowing faintly under the setting sun. Children whispered to each other, adults shook their heads, but no one spoke aloud. They were too afraid, too amazed. Eric's climbed a small ridge, the fox following closely. From there he could see the entire colony, the fields, the distant mountains and the dragons above. He whispered into the wind, a soft call carried by the evening air. The dragons tilted their massive heads, acknowledging him once more. They did not speak in words humans could understand, but the boy knew their intent. They would protect. They would watch. The night fell, cool and quiet, with stars blinking into existence. The dragons rose higher, disappearing into the darkness above, but the tremor of their presence lingered. Eric sat on the ridge, the fox curled at his feet, and he listened. He listened to the wind, to the soil, to the animals, and to the memory of the dragons that now answered his call. For the first time humans realized that power was not always in machines or weapons. Sometimes, it was in understanding, in patience and in listening. Eric's whispered softly to the stars, "I hear you." Somewhere far above, beyond the reach of human sight, the dragons replied with a quiet acknowledgement, a rhythm felt in the bones of the world. And in that moment, the colony understood that the boy they had mocked had awakened something far greater than any of them had ever known. The night air was tense, filled with the quiet hum of dragons hovering above the colony. Their massive wings stirred the wind, and their glowing eyes watched every movement below. Eric's veil stood in the center of the plain, the fox at his side, and felt the pulse of their presence. He could sense their patience, their judgment, and the weight of an ancient power that had not been awakened for centuries. The humans were afraid. They huddled behind walls and vehicles, whispering questions and doubts. The alien ships had retreated for now, but the threat was not gone. The colony depended on technology and machines, but Eric's knew that in this moment trust and understanding would matter more than weapons. He looked up at the dragons, feeling their immense intelligence and their quiet strength. They did not speak in words but in vibrations, in subtle shifts of the air and the ground. One dragon, larger than the others, descended slowly, landing a short distance from the boy. Its scales shimmered in the moonlight, and its eyes glowed like embers. Eric's did not flinch. He knelt and whispered softly, calling out not in commands, but in words that carried respect and honesty. The dragon lowered its massive head, studying him. It had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, yet this human boy did not speak with fear nor with pride. He spoke as one who listened. A hum of energy pulsed from the dragon, and Eric's felt it deep in his chest. It was a test, though not one of fire or battle. The dragon's presence demanded a choice. It could see the boy's potential to lead or to destroy. But Eric's mind was clear. He could leave the colony behind and join the dragons, soaring through the stars, leaving humanity to its fragile survival. It would be an easy choice for some. Yet he could not abandon those who had doubted him, even if they had mocked him for years. "I do not seek power for myself," Eric's whispered. "I only wish to protect them." The dragon lowered its wings, the ground trembling slightly under its weight. It tilted its massive head as if weighing the boy's honesty. Around them the other dragons hovered, observing, waiting. Their enormous forms blocked the stars, casting the colony in moving shadows that felt both dangerous and protective. The fox barked once, alerting Eric's to the first signs of movement from the alien scouts returning in the distance. Their ships glinted in the moonlight, small but fast. The humans tensed, readying turrets and weapons, but Eric's did not panic. He placed a hand gently on the nearest dragon's scaled foreleg. "Help me," he whispered. "Not for me but for all of them." The dragon exhaled a soft heat, and the air shimmered in response, carrying a vibration that reached the humans as a strange calm. Then the dragons acted. With coordinated motion they surged into the sky, a wave of living power and light. The alien ships fired, but the dragons moved with impossible speed, intercepting the attacks without hesitation. Energy pulses disabled the ship's engines, forcing them to retreat again. Flames and force shields were unnecessary. The dragon's presence alone commanded the battlefield. The humans watched, some trembling, some cheering, realizing that they had never faced a threat like this before. Eric's guided the dragons with soft words, moving among the animals and humans alike. He whispered to the sky goats, directing them away from danger. He sang to the birds, calming their flight. He even reached out in silent communication to the foxes and other smaller creatures. Every action was gentle but purposeful. The dragons answered him, moving as if in perfect harmony with his voice and his intentions. The battle was over in minutes, the aliens retreating into the void, leaving the colony unscathed. After the retreat, Eric's knelt again, feeling the tremors beneath the ground settle. The dragons hovered quietly, circling above, no longer a threat, no longer a test. They were guardians now, watching but not interfering unnecessarily. One of the smaller dragons descended, lowering its head to nuzzle the boy softly. He placed his hand against its shimmering scales, feeling warmth and trust. "Thank you," he whispered. Not just for him but for the colony, for the creatures, for the balance that had been restored. The humans approached cautiously, still unsure whether to fear or respect these creatures. Leora Kate stepped forward, her voice low. "Eric's, you did it? You saved everyone." He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I did not do it alone. They listened. I only asked." The lesson was simple but powerful. Understanding and honesty could command forces far greater than any machine or weapon. The dragons did not linger long. One by one they rose into the night sky, massive wings folding gracefully, disappearing into the darkness above. But the bond remained. Eric's could still feel their presence, faint but steady, a promise that they would return if needed. The humans were left in awe, realizing that this boy they had mocked held a power they could barely comprehend. Not the power of fire, not the power of weapons, but the power of listening, understanding, and trust. Eric's walked among the colonists, the fox padding silently at his side. Children stared, mouths open, whispering among themselves. Adults shook their heads in disbelief, some in respect, others in fear. The colony had survived a threat they could not face alone, and a boy who had once been mocked had been the bridge between worlds. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of gold, the colony was alive with a quiet energy. People whispered of the dragons, of the boy who had spoken to them, and of the lessons learned. Eric sat quietly on the ridge, the fox at his feet, watching the horizon. He did not need applause or recognition. He had chosen to protect, and that choice had changed everything. In the stillness, he whispered softly to the wind, to the earth, and to the unseen guardians above, "I will listen. I will protect." And somewhere far beyond the stars, the dragons felt his words and answered with a silent, steady acknowledgement. Trust had been given, and the boy had proven that honesty and care could guide forces older than humanity itself. The colony was quiet the next morning. The alien threat had vanished, retreating beyond the stars, and the humans were left to stare at the sky, still wondering if what they had seen was real. Eric's veil walked among them, the fox at his side, his eyes calm but alert. He felt the subtle pulse of the world, the hum of life in the soil, the whispers of the wind. And far above, though unseen, the dragons lingered, their presence faint but steady. The colony had changed. People moved with more care, more awareness of the animals and the land around them. Children whispered about the boy who had spoken to dragons, their voices full of awe rather than mockery. Adults too could not deny the truth. Machines and weapons had failed, but the boy had listened, and through listening he had guided forces far beyond their understanding. Eric said little but he noticed. Every glance, Every small act of respect from the colonists reminded him that understanding was stronger than fear. Eric spent the day walking the plains. He visited the nests of sky goats, the roosts of birds, and the dens of foxes. Each creature seemed to recognize him, moving calmly at his approach. He whispered to them, not in commands but in a rhythm they understood. The animals responded as if teaching him new lessons every moment. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of the dragons reached him. It was quieter now, but it was there, a gentle pulse in the wind, a reminder that they were watching. Leora Kate approached him as he knelt by a glowing vein of earth. "Eric's," she said softly, "how do you do it? How do you hear them?" He looked at her, dark eyes steady, and smiled faintly. "I do not hear like you do," he said. "I feel. I listen. Life speaks even if people forget. The dragons, the animals, the land, they all speak the same language. You just have to want to hear it." She shook her head, amazed. She had studied energy patterns, vibrations, and alien frequencies, but nothing had prepared her for this. That night, the colony gathered for a small celebration. They lit fires and shared food, though the mood was quiet, reflective. No one could forget the power that had saved them, and no one could forget the boy who had called it. Eric's walked among the people, offering small smiles, nods, and words of comfort. Children ran to him, eager for a story or a whisper. Adults lingered, watching, listening, trying to understand. The colony had survived, not by force, but by a boy who knew the value of listening and trust. Far above, the dragons began to rise again, their massive forms cutting through the night sky. Eric's watched, standing on a ridge, the fox at his feet. He whispered softly, calling out not in demand but in greeting. The dragons tilted their heads, acknowledging him. They had remembered the voice that had summoned them, the voice that had shown them the truth of humanity's potential. They did not come to rule or destroy. They came to watch, to guide if necessary, and to trust once more. Eric spoke to the dragons in soft tones, and for the first time he realized the full weight of what he could do. He was not a warrior. He was not a ruler. He was a bridge. Through his listening, he could connect creatures that had once been distant, forgotten, or afraid. The dragons responded subtly, shifting in formation, circling the colony, a silent promise of protection. The humans below could only stare, awestruck, as shadows passed over the plains, their forms both terrifying and magnificent. Over the following weeks, the colony began to thrive in ways no one expected. Food supplies improved not because of machines but because Eric's guided the animals, teaching the humans how to care for them better. Resources were used more wisely, with respect for the land and creatures that shared it. Stories spread among the people of the boy who could speak to the world, and whispers traveled to neighboring colonies. They spoke of dragons returning to answer a human call, of a child whose voice could reach across species and even the stars. One evening, as the sun set in fiery reds and oranges, Eric stood alone on a ridge, the fox curled at his feet. He looked to the horizon, where the faint shimmer of dragons could be seen in the fading light. He whispered softly, a promise more than a call. "I will listen. I will protect. I will not forget." Somewhere far beyond the stars, the dragons responded, their movements slow but deliberate, a recognition of his vow. Humans began to change too. They learned patience, observation, and respect. They realized that the universe was larger and older than their machines and weapons, and that understanding could save them where fire could not. The story of Eric's veil spread slowly at first, then quickly carried by travelers, scouts, and distant colonies. People began to seek the voice that had changed the outcome of a battle, the voice that had reminded the galaxy that humans could be more than conquerors, they could be listeners, protectors, and allies. Eric's never sought fame or glory. He continued to walk the plains, to speak to the animals, and to whisper to the winds. The dragons remained far above, distant but present, a steady reminder that the galaxy had noticed him. Children came to him to learn, adults came to watch, and even the land seemed to hum with a gentle energy that had not existed before. The fox padded beside him, and together they stood on the ridge, looking at the stars. The colony slept below, safe for now, and the night air carried the faint hum of dragons circling above. Eric smiled softly, feeling the rhythm of life that connected everything. His voice had reached beyond the colony, beyond the planet, and perhaps even beyond the stars. He had proven that a human could bridge worlds, guide ancient forces, and inspire understanding where fear had ruled. And somewhere in the infinite darkness of space, dragons stirred in quiet acknowledgement. The boy's voice, small yet steady, had reminded them why they once cared. Eric's veil had changed the galaxy, not with fire, not with weapons, but with the simple, powerful act of listening. The wind carried his whisper into the night, soft but sure. I hear you. I will protect. I will remember. And the dragons, ancient and patient, answered in a way that only he could feel. A new era had begun, and humans, for the first time in centuries, had earned the attention of the guardians of the stars.